Hi everybody, my name is Rafael Lozano-Hemmer and I'm an artist. I am both from Mexico and Canada, and I'm recording this video from my studio to tell you about a big, exciting art project I'm making for Manchester called Atmospheric Memory. Atmospheric Memory is going to be kind of like an exhibition, but also kind of like a theater play, which takes a subject of the work of a man called Charles Babbage. Charles Babbage was a 19th century inventor. And this inventor, among many other things, invented the first calculator, the first computer. It was a mechanical device that could add up numbers and simplify the jobs of the people who had to do it all by hand. So I don't know if you've ever appreciated a calculator instead of doing your job by hand. Well, that's all thanks to Charles Babbage almost 180 years ago. Now, Charles Babbage was a really interesting fellow. He said something in a book called the Ninth Bridgewater Treatise, which really inspired me to make an artwork about what he was saying. What he said is that when we speak, we generate a turbulence of air. So basically we have air in our lungs, this is private air, and then as we speak, it comes out into the atmosphere and it makes a shape. What Babbage said is that all of the atmosphere is basically all of these different shapes of voices of people in the past. He thought, what would happen if we had a computer that was so sophisticated that we could rewind the motion of all of those molecules in the atmosphere to recreate the voices of everybody who's spoken in the past? So the idea is that the atmosphere is a vast library, that everyone has ever said is still in the atmosphere, and that somehow, if we could develop a sophisticated technology, we could eavesdrop and listen and recreate the sounds of the past. So just imagine, you could hear long lost relatives or people that you met a long time ago or historical figures. If you could hear anybody, the question is, who would you want to hear? It's also interesting that imagine if the atmosphere is recording everything we say. You could also imagine a situation where people who were doing wrongdoing, they could actually be held responsible for those actions. And Babbage was fascinated with this idea that the atmosphere was recording everything we say. So all of the artworks that I made for Atmospheric Memory are actually devices to try and recreate the voice, to see, well, what is the shape of the voice? I'm here to show you one element, which is called the volute. And this is it. It's a 3D printed speech bubble. You know, in comic books, you always have like a little speech bubble, a little cloudy thing where the text of what is being spoken is written. That actually started, for example, in Mexico, where I'm from, back 2,000 years ago in our codices. When people wanted to represent speech, they would put speech bubbles. But also 500 years ago in Europe, also the representation of speech was made with banderoles. But what we did in my studio is we wanted to know, well, what is the real shape of your mouth, of the air as you're speaking? This thing here is actually a laser scan. We took a scan of somebody's voice as he spoke with a thing called a tomograph, and then we made these density maps. We joined them together into a model, and then we gave it to a machine called a 3D printer to print it in steel. So this right here is a word coming from my mouth. This here is the mouth. And then this here is time. So as time passes, the word becomes this shape. Now, what's interesting about the first word ever to be 3D printed is that, in fact, if you take the same person and he or she says the very same thing, the shape will be completely different because of a thing called fluid dynamics, which means that every single motion of the air will have its own kind of shape. So in a way, this artistic project is strange because it's capturing a very unique presence. Now, this first word is actually the French word "o," because the first phrase that we printed, which I'll show you next, is this one. This is a phrase called "Au clair de la lune," which is a little song in French. This is the mouth right here, and then this is time. So this is Au clair de la lune. And the reason why we chose this sentence to be printed as a sculpture is because before Edison recorded the voice, there was another inventor called de Martinville. The very, very first person to record the human voice was this fellow de Martinville in a machine he called the autophonograph. The autophonograph recorded voice using these soot and wax. And so that's how he recorded his voice. So now we use, for example, vinyl in a vinyl record or magnetic tape, or now in the digital world, we actually digitize it, convert it into ones and zeros to be able to have a recording. But the very, very first human recording was de Martinville. And the first thing that he said to his device is au clair de la lune. So that's what we decided to also make the first 3D printed speech bubble. So this gives you a glimpse onto one of many different experiences that you will have at Atmospheric Memory. In the package with the educational kit, we've sent you an example of a 3D printed speech bubbles so that you can feel what it feels like to hold your voice. It's also the size of your hand. It's kind of interesting. But we've also sent a little device. It's called an anemometer. It's kind of like an anemometer and a weather vane all at once, which is kind of like an atmospheric machine, which measures in which direction the wind is blowing and also how fast it's going. So we made our own version of it, except we're going to use these tiny little fans to control its direction with your voice. So we've sent you an example of one of them. In the actual show at Atmospheric Memory, you'll be able to control 99 of these little robotic weather vanes, and they will actually distribute and make shapes according to your voice. You'll have a microphone. I'm also sending a little atomizer. It's an ultrasonic device, which is basically like a little ceramic plate which vibrates very, very, very quickly. And what it does is the water that is on top of this little plate gets converted into tiny little wisps of vapor, of water vapor, cold water vapor. And it's not really a boiling water because that would be hot. This is cold. It's a device that is typically used for humidifiers and for aromatherapy devices. You put it underwater, and you give it a charge, a current. It will vibrate and then create these little smoke plumes, which are safe to touch, but do not touch the device itself. Only the vapor is safe to touch. And in Atmospheric Memory, we were going to use that to create an enormous wall of atmospheric or these atomizing agents, which will create whatever you say onto a microphone, will make it into huge words, 8 meters wide, with clouds. So this is the technology that we will use to create this sort of cloud texts that will be written in the artwork. I invite you to come to Atmospheric Memory, check it out, bring your friends. It's work that lasts about 1 hour. Some of the stuff is a little bit loud and some of it's fun. We have a tunnel that's a bit scary. It's 36 meters long. It has 3,000 little loudspeakers, each of which is telling you something different. So it's a little bit of a crazy experience, but I'm sure you'll have fun with it. And also I want you all to appreciate that art and science can work together to create new experiences, and hopefully you can find them rewarding and exciting. Thank you so much for your attention.